Kia ora, and welcome to another video celebrating World Breastfeeding Week 2020. This is intended as a platform to share diverse experiences and information, and we hope that you find this series supportive and informative. It is important to note that these are personal stories and opinions and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women's Health Action or our funders. Please seek advice from your health professional before making any important decisions about infant or young child feeding.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Kelly Dorgan. I'm a breastfeeding peer counsellor administrator and I coordinate the Canterbury Breastfeeding Advocacy Service at Te Pō Waitanga Ki Otautahi Trust here in Christchurch.
Right. Hello, I'm Andrea. I run the Digital Mother for Mother Breastfeeding Group, and I'm quite happy to be here and talk with you all.
Hi, I am Kristen. I am a mum of 3 girls. I'm a breastfeeding peer support counsellor. I'm studying in the pregnancy sphere at the moment and really excited to be here and chat with you guys.
Kia ora, my name is Olivia and I'm a breastfeeding peer counsellor and mother of 2 boys, and I work for Te Pō Waitanga facilitating 2 breastfeeding support groups.
Kia ora, I'm Alicia. I'm a mother of a 10-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I've been a breastfeeding peer counsellor for a decade now.
Awesome. So we're just here to have a chat about the peer counsellor role and some of the challenges and some of the wins. As you've heard, people here are working in different spaces. So the breastfeeding peer counsellor training that this team has done consists of between 20 and 24 hours of education to gear them up with the skills and the evidence-based information so that they can confidently go out into the community and provide support to breastfeeding whānau. It was developed by La Leche League New Zealand, and there's a number of programs that are run over the country. We've got 2 here in Otautahi. So we're going to have a chat about the role. So first of all, I thought it'd be good to have a bit of a conversation about some of the challenges that new families face when it comes to breastfeeding. Some of the things that you think are some of the biggest challenges of breastfeeding.
Inconsistent advice from well-meaning family and support people.
Yeah, and the sheer volume of it.
Yeah.
And often the realities compared to what you think breastfeeding is going to be like, and then the realities of what it's actually like, can be quite a shock.
So further inconsistencies as well.
Even being a breastfeeding peer counsellor and having breastfed for 2 years with my first, breastfeeding her in that first week, I was just blown away by how hard it was again. I sort of went into it expecting it to be as easy as it was at the end of my breastfeeding journey with Melbourne.
So expectations as well. Do you think that anybody can prepare themselves sufficiently for breastfeeding before they actually get to it?
I think you can prepare yourself to a certain extent, but it's always going to be harder than you imagine.
Always.
I think it's always new, like even if you have subsequent children, it doesn't mean it's the same because every baby feeds very differently and your own expectations and your own skills are always slightly changing. I think lots of mums, especially when they've already had a child or more children, they think, I just, carry on, but often it's not as easy as they think and then get really frustrated, and sometimes they might not want to ask because they think they should know everything already, or the expectations from others is you should know, and then you often think, I'm not so sure, and then finding support, like people just to reassure them and give them a hand, I think, it's important.
And the expectations that you put on yourself as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Lots of unrealistic expectations and lots of inconsistencies and limited amount of preparation that you can do because it's relational, isn't it?
It's teamwork between you and your baby. It doesn't matter if you're first or your third.
But also to give it time. It's not that you have a baby and then it automatically happens. I think lots of mums think this is
Natural.
just natural comes along, and then it's like, well, no, it's something you learn. It
And
takes some
baby's learning
time.
too.
Yeah.
I think that natural doesn't equal easy. And I think that that's something that people often forget. absolutely, childbirth, pregnancy, breastfeeding, all the most natural things you can think of, also extremely difficult.
Yeah, they're inherently challenging,
Yeah.
aren't they? And I don't know if we honour the challenge or prepare people for the challenge as much as we could. So what do you see as being some of the biggest enablers, so some of the things that are really supportive for families' breastfeeding journeys? Is there anything in particular?
I think if they've had a bit of information beforehand, before they actually have the baby, I know you focus on the birth quite a lot because that's important at the time, but then sometimes just to kind of prepare them a little bit to say, take your time and I'm here, and to give them the reassurance that there is some help there and where they can actually go and seek help. I think that's often quite important, and maybe invite them in before to come along and have a look.
And to also make sure that their immediate family and even extended family are all on board to there, because they're the people that are going to be there.
Supporting them. So any other things that you see as being part of many successful breastfeeding journeys?
I think and if you've had experience with breastfeeding growing up, seeing your mum or aunties or other women in your lives, you have a different perspective on breastfeeding because you've got the experience, and you're also going to have the support of women sharing with you their stories about breastfeeding, and that can be hard to find.
Yeah, so exposure.
And I think partners, to actually get your partners on board, that they be your big support, and that they make you feel comfortable and not, some men might get a bit awkward when it comes to breastfeeding, just to kind of have them on board, that they know this is a very normal, natural way of doing it, and we do not need to embarrass or hide it somewhere, that it's actually a natural way of feeding your child, and that you have your partner there for times where you yourself might not really be strong, and we've all probably come to a point where we think, oh my god, it's all too much. But if you have your partner there, I think especially your partner, to help and support you and to look after the mum, I think that's often a very good start for your journey, that you do it together.
Absolutely.
Knowing that someone's got your back.
Yeah.
And
And
that
they
they
can take with as well.
Yeah. So having someone that knows how important it is to you, and that will stand up for you in any situation that you might find yourself in. And if only we could all be, everyone in our community could be those people. Yeah.
And even for them to know the basics of breastfeeding, because it might be in the middle of the night when you have those feelings that this is all too much, and it might just be a simple little tweak or something that you've forgotten because you're so tired, and that's when your partner can step in and remind you of something that they've learned about breastfeeding as well. So even though they think maybe a breastfeeding class might not be necessary for them, it actually is.
Yeah, so encouraging anyone who might be involved in supporting this mama in her early parenting journey to come along to antenatal education, so that they're all on board.
Yeah.
And I think that especially when men know, or not men, but we all everybody has partners, or when your partner actually know what kind of how they can support, I think that will encourage them and feel them, really enable them and encourage them to be a supportive person. I know I've heard, you probably also often heard that they say, oh, I wish they could feed a bottle, or someone else could feed a bottle to connect. And I said, but there are lots of other ways, and I think if we get your partner to come along and help and support and find ways, because I think sometimes when you're not the breastfeeding or the feeding mother, and you're trying to help from the outside, to give them actually say, okay, you can do this and you can do that. They give suggestions, and that empowers them as well, makes them feel part of the whole early days.
Absolutely. And so what do you see as being some of the barriers to the breastfeeding peer counsellor role? The three of you are formally engaged in a role But generally, for peer counsellors who have done the training and are out there, what are some of the things that might make it hard for them to engage in this kind of work?
Well, Alicia, you can. I think survivor bias is a really big problem. You know, older generations, oh, well, I put my baby on a bottle from 3 weeks and it was fine. Or I gave my baby solids at 3 months and it was fine. And it's like, just because it was fine for you doesn't mean that it's fine for everybody. Doesn't mean that it's, you know, what's currently indicated as being best practice, and it doesn't mean that you did anything necessarily wrong. You did the best that you could at the time with the information that you have, but now we have new information that says that actually it's better to wait, or it's better to do X, Y, Z. So I think that that's the biggest problem, really, is actually people that are almost offended by your breastfeeding promotion because it didn't work for them, and that's very painful for them.
So that balance as a peer counsellor of putting yourself out there as a breastfeeding advocate, you get some flack.
Especially online.
And you come across people that maybe had their babies, like you say, 30 years ago, and you can tell they're still carrying grief around things not going as successfully as they would have wanted. Because they straight away come up with a reason why they couldn't breastfeed, and you're like, whoa, no,
So
I'm not taking you.
it's balancing triggering, knowing you're going to trigger people with your advocacy for breastfeeding, but then also being really open to being supportive of those mothers that want to breastfeed and they want the information, they want it to work, because that does happen.
So walking on eggshells.
But
In terms of putting yourselves out there and saying this is who I am and this is what I want to do, but knowing you might cop some flack from people whose grief hasn't been worked through and developed a whole thinking process around what breastfeeding advocacy means for them.
And being able to say, not necessarily breast is best, but breast milk is best for your baby because it's the most nutritionally balanced food, which is it's just actually fact. And balancing that with saying, however, other ways you feed your baby are X, Y, Z. It's so hard.
And I guess that kind of leads into the question of, do we offer enough support to those who are struggling with breastfeeding, or who are mixed feeding, or who are not breastfeeding for whatever reason, or, as has come up in this conversation, for those who have had traumatic breastfeeding journeys, who can't celebrate breastfeeding because of that. What are your ideas around how we might better support those populations?
I think it's good to be really open, that we really kind of open up, that we say we are breastfeeding peer counsellor, but I think we all include probably as babies that there is not just the breast. This is I think often it's been more about like the breast milk rather than how you actually administer it to them. And I find it quite important to include anyone who needs support and who wants to come along. And it'd be lovely. Like, I think in all the groups, every mum is welcome to come along, but they might not feel so comfortable about it. I think every mum who seeks support for feeding their baby there are open doors, like they can always come along and ask, because our training doesn't stop with breastfeeding. We all have all sorts of feeding methods, and I think that's often what it's good to be out there, that we say there's not only one way. There are so many options, and often I think people who can't, or women who can't actually breastfeed, may have not had the right support, and if they get the right support, then they actually might have a successful journey. But quite often this happens and they give up and there's nobody there who supports them. So I think it's really important to let parents know that we can help with any kind of issues, or we know how to refer you on if there are, underlying conditions and that need more help.
Sorry, you go.
What I would really love to actually see more of is the protection of the breastfeeding relationship, because I do probably a lot more engagement online with breastfeeding mums who are asking for help, and the help is just put them on the bottle I did, and it was okay, rather than them being offered that support to continue breastfeeding, because that's what they're asking for. And sometimes continuing breastfeeding is the harder option, but being able to access that support to continue doing it, and I'd love to be able to do that more, and really openly do it, to be able to say, hey, let's continue breastfeeding.
However that works.
Out.
Yeah, if we need to bring in,
Mixed feeding
And it's not a one-lane road,
Yeah.
If you kind of had to stop for a wee while, it doesn't mean you can't go back. And I think that's often women don't know, they don't have the information, and it's there to say, hey, there are other ways, and we can work together. Like there are other options than just kind of stop completely. And I think that's I'm very passionate about that.
Just protecting that relationship.
I think, like you say, that is really hard though, especially on Facebook, where someone will ask for advice and there's 20 to 50 people saying, just give them, I use this formula, or I do this, and one person saying, oh, actually, relactation is an option, or, our voices are often drowned out, I think.
They are.
Even in a country like New Zealand, where it is very pro-breastfeeding and our hospital's breastfeeding friendly and all of that kind of thing, there's still so much bad information out there.
And I've heard breastfeeding advocacy sometimes termed as privilege, that's a really privileged space that you can offer that suggestion from, because it suggests that everyone's able to breastfeed kind of thing. There's a lot of grief out there, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah. And so how do we honour those journeys that people are carrying beyond their breastfeeding journey, so that we can all have these conversations about how we support people who want to breastfeed.
And I think it's really hard because we can often see from our own experiences, that's why we're here, we can see the trauma and the grief in other people. So being able to acknowledge that really respectfully as well, and open up those conversations respectfully about perhaps something they don't even know they're aware of carrying.
That takes time and skill.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of them don't know that they're carrying that grief.
And it comes often then comes out in the conversation.
Defensive.
And then when you kind of keep listening, and then you kind of most of the times we're listening, it's that listening and it's encouraging and just actually being there. I think that's one of the biggest parts of our roles, because sometimes the breastfeeding issue is the tip of the iceberg, and it's the door opener to actually kind of get to the real kind of what's underlying. But then I thought it's actually really beautiful that someone can relax and open up about maybe things they've not been able to talk about. And I think that's a very beautiful, for a breastfeeding peer support. I find that very, I'm really grateful that you can offer that and just be there and listen. And then I think those women who may have not maybe had a good support or a good, a positive outcome, but if you be there and show them, they talk to others and maybe pass on that, maybe you could probably go a different route than I've gone. And I think that's a important role for us to be there. And
I guess we've talked about some of the wins of the role. Is that opportunity to really listen and be there for somebody as they open up about things that might be touched on by breastfeeding, but probably go a lot further. What are some of the other things? What's some of your other motivations, or some of the best types of experiences that this role offers?
Well, like today, for example, at group, when you bring people together who are going through the same stage with their baby, and they buddy up and they meet outside of the group as well, and they've found a friend to share the journey with.
Yeah, so creating the opportunity for other connections
Yeah,
to have
build
fun.
a community.
Yeah.
A breastfeeding community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. What other things have people experienced?
I had a really great experience online, just with a particular mum, one-on-one, really helping her work through oversupply, and I was quite new to the role then, and so I was feeling a little bit, iffy about what I was sharing, but I knew I had all my information, and it all worked out, and she maintained her supply really well and continued breastfeeding for over 12 months, so it was such a cool experience to have, and gave me a real boost to my confidence, and she maintained that breastfeeding relationship that she loved so much.
But had significant
Oh, yeah.
challenges.
Massive.
Yeah. So that sense of, I made a difference
Yes.
in somebody's journey.
And she maintained the relationship that she wanted to have,
Yeah.
which was cool.
Yeah. So she met her breastfeeding goals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's beautiful, like often it's only a few years down the track where they actually say, oh, do you remember when you came round and helped me? I would have not carried on feeding. And she said, we really came in a moment that was very difficult and hard, and then she said, and when you were there and helped me, that really changed. And I thought, this is so nice, but often it's actually quite a few years down the track, and then they come back to you and they say, no, thank you so much for being there. Or when they kind of recommend them to others, so, go to the group if you have some problems, they really help you. And I think this is fantastic, because that's how people then, when another mother, word by mouth, that's when they come along, because it's already something, okay, the other mum's been there and she said it was very good help, so that's beautiful. They then come as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or when they message you,
Yes.
say if they've had come up against an issue and
Yeah.
you've given them some suggestions and some
Yeah.
information, and then they message you excited because something's worked.
That's great. Yeah.
And you work in quite a small community, Andrea, and so you get that quite often. People see you in the street and letting you know how you've impacted.
Yeah, and that's the beauty. I think that's the beauty of working in or being in a small community, that they often say, when someone's pregnant, say, you need to go and see Andrea, and then come to the group, and it's really lovely. Or when we just walk, or school pack-ups, and then, I have a quick question, could you just kind of, and I love that, and it's, it makes you feel really part and be part of the mothers and with the families.
And so we're a part of the community, and but those of us working where there's not that already fixed community, that's a barrier, isn't it? Actually getting people to feel comfortable enough to come to a group that they haven't been to before. Do you want to talk a little bit more about
When they're feeling vulnerable.
when they're feeling vulnerable, or the actual amount of effort that it takes to get the word out there about your services and about the groups?
Yeah, like quite often when people get here, they'll say, I didn't even know this was on. Or if we have an event, and then you go on to tell them, well, we're actually here each week. Are you? Yeah, that's really hard. But Alicia's been great with advertising.
Purely from a selfish standpoint of showing up to a group, and when Evie was newborn and there being not really anyone and wanting to make friends, so I made them. I made them come.
Hold the community in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like at the end of the day, most groups are facilitated by breastfeeding peer counsellors, and most breastfeeding peer counsellors are not professional marketers. And I happen to be a professional marketer, so I managed to get the group from, 1 or 2 people to, I think 26 is the most that we've had. Yeah, and that's been pretty rewarding, like knowing that I'm making a difference for people is amazing.
Yeah. So I guess that's one of the challenges of the role, isn't it, is resourcing, is that there's a few in our community in Canterbury, there's a few, very few, paid peer counsellor facilitator roles, but they don't have a whole lot of extra resourcing sitting around them for that social media work or the marketing and so that resourcing then becomes because you're paid to come and facilitate the group.
Set up, we can be here,
Haven't got time
bringing the people
bring
in.
them in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so resourcing and funding of the role and awareness of the role, I think, as well, is a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
I think it's great now that the student midwives come along to groups, and that's, I find it very lovely, because then because the midwife is probably our, a link a little bit in the or your doctors, and that that they know we're here and they can point the mothers into the right direction. And I think, especially with LMCs working together, or to kind of tell them what we're doing and that we're here, because that will support them as well. They don't have a lot of time to sit there with the feeding, and then they can actually say, if you go along there, you get really good support. And I think that really changed over the years. This is coming a bit more and more, that more LMCs and GPs are aware of the groups.
The referring, that's still a challenge that we have.
Yeah. I asked my LMC last year about what groups were on this side of town. She didn't know of any, despite the fact I was there this one.
It really pays, like, for example, in Littleton, I have actually gone to the doctors and talked to them, explained a little bit, and we've had a few, like I know 2 mums of my group, they are GPs, and they have actually done the peer counsellor training. I said, this is so fantastic.
Yeah,
so good.
Because it's about getting breastfeeding champions in all layers of our community, isn't it?
And also that we have, we all trained. It's like that's what we said at the beginning. We all say the same, like we all pull on one string. We all say the same information, and we have really good, valuable information, not just, what you picked up from all different. So we all have the same good training.
Yeah, it's a really comprehensive program, isn't it? With lots of good resources that are easy to, they've been developed for sharing with women who have got babies, so they're pretty comprehensive. Do you think we as a community expect too much of new parents and new mums in particular? Generally, we've just increased our paid parental leave to 26 weeks, which is a massive one. When I had my babies, there was none whatsoever. But is that enough in terms of, how the wider society, and I guess how our government values the role of parenting and the challenges that come particularly within that first period?
Absolutely not.
I think so.
And I think it's a danger for women as well. I think that particularly, paid parental leave is wonderful. 26 weeks, great. Still not very long though, in the scheme of 18 years of raising a child.
And then
26 weeks is
preschool, sending your child to daycare, preschool, how that affects your breastfeeding journey and the expense. So you're often going to work more than what you want to pay to send them to preschool.
Which interrupts with that feeding even more. And the Ministry of Health recommends breastfeeding for a minimum of a year, and yet we know that returning to work and breastfeeding is incredibly challenging. So
helping women through that journey that's probably been the biggest barrier that I've come across since actively starting to be a peer counsellor again about a year ago. Is that's the thing that comes up actually most, is not, I've got a low supply or whatever, it's I'm returning to work and I don't want to pump at work, or so that's so sad, because it doesn't.
They've got that far and they want to keep going.
Yeah.
There's a massive barrier that's put up, and sometimes it's not necessarily that the workplace isn't supportive. It's just the logistics.
I think they have so much anxiety of, I've had a mum, in 6 months she's going to work and she's already really worried because she's just established breastfeeding, and then and it puts such a big worry on lots of women.
And what does that do?
How do I manage, and do I need to pump and and it's often probably will, I remember the days where I said, oh my God, this is happening, I need to go back to work, how will I do it? You get there, but it's very stressful for many families, for the whole family.
And we know that stress is
Not really.
it's counterproductive in breastfeeding because of its impact on the hormones. But yeah, and it's also a time, 6 months is also a time when we're beginning to introduce solids, but the breastfeeding is still really, really important. And so I think even 9 months, by then babies are often eating a bit more and breastfeeding's starting to wind down a little bit. But
Developmental beeps.
yeah, but if we got to 9 months, I'd probably be saying, we need a year. Yeah, the dangling carrot. But I think 6 months, while it's way better than 3 months, is a really difficult time in terms of, in terms of babies still being so reliant on that source of nutrition.
And it comes down to so much more than nutrition.
Yeah.
So we can think breastfeeding is going to change, but often it can ramp up because teething or brain development, and they just want cuddles and comfort and all that other stuff breastfeeding provides. It can really ramp up.
Yeah, and then culturally, our society is so focused around working roles and employment in the workplace. And I spoke to, for an event we're doing on Friday, I spoke to 4 Zambian sisters, and they said that if somebody's not breastfeeding in the first 2 years of a child's life, it's like, well, something must be really wrong because you got cancer, or it's there, and the breasts aren't sexualised because they're just seen everywhere as being
It's
for
normal,
feeding
yes,
children.
yeah.
And so they came here and were like, I remember one of them saying to me, what is it with New Zealand men? This isn't for them, this is for them. Because it was weird.
Yeah.
So, just our values are not centred around families and the needs of our dependent family members.
I think there's a lot of fan service around that, like, oh, mothering is such a hard job. People like to say that, but no one actually seems to believe it, like people can say that being a mother is the hardest job in the world, but then at the same time, you're certainly not compensated for that work. And I feel like it's just something that people say, and it's not truly reinforced or necessarily actually internalized and believed. And I think that
By those who aren't doing it.
I think even by those that do
Yes,
it.
I think even as mothers, we can say, yes, it's really hard, but I've got to go to work tomorrow. And I've been up all night with my baby, but I've got to go to work, I've just got to suck it up. It's this, we become martyrs half the time because we have to. And it's the society that we're in. You can't really parent from the heart and just say, well, I'm not going to work, I'm going to stay here with my baby all day because I'm so tired. We don't get that option.
And then do you think other women are like, well, she can do it.
And that's
She's
how
going to
it
work
gets
each day,
created.
so I must be able to do
Isn't
it. Yeah, look at all these women
Yeah.
that manage.
And then you think, because everybody else does it, and then you think, I have to kind of get together and you kind of falling apart on the inside. I can't stop. Got to take it for the team.
And if you are lucky enough, or sometimes unlucky enough, to be a mother that's not also working, then society just expects you to be reliant on your partner. There's no safety net for women that are in relationships that are full-time parents to know that I have this money that's for me. There's no protection at all.
And
I
no
think
acknowledgement of the benefit of babies being at
Absolutely.
home either. I think there's a real push to get babies into childcare centres, even though there is some evidence that suggests that that might not be in their absolute best interest, depending on the home environment a little bit as well.
I think it's as with most issues, in my feminist opinion, it comes down to the fact that our society as a whole, globally, is patriarchal. It's male-focused. That's what we have historically cared about, is what happens to men. And just because the current legislation says that we have equality doesn't mean that we actually have equality. Like, yes, in a workplace, legally speaking in New Zealand, breastfeeding has to be protected. That doesn't mean that it is.
So our task after this session is that we're going to set up a motherhood political party
I'm there.
and take over the world.
And create breastfeeding-friendly workspaces.
Breastfeeding friendly countries.
Because it is when if you still want to be like I know lots of women you want to be a mother and you might still want to work in your profession because I hope that lots of people really like what they're doing, and so sometimes it can be a bit hard to actually give this up for your family. Some women, you identify yourself a little bit what your work is, and then you want to be there with your child. You would like to work a little bit, let's say half a day a week or something, to have a balance in mothering, but also have that other role where you still have your, I won't say career, but where you have another side, and quite often it's actually not possible, so you need to choose either or. And often I think, why can we not, we're so many women with families, we should be able to share, or we should have the opportunity to say, I would actually like to work during school hours or 2 days a week, or actually just 4 hours a week or something, just to kind of keep this up. And I find that sometimes a bit hard that this is not possible. But then on the other hand, I think we need to really support each other and actually put our foot down and say, hang on, no, we can do this. And quite often people actually, oh, okay, yeah, well,
maybe we can,
and that we need to speak up about it, not always, oh yeah, okay, I'll stay back and it's okay, I'll get my time. And I say, no, hang on, we actually can make it work and we can make a difference. But this is also like again a support that we say, okay, if we all team up together, then we can change things. I truly believe that. So we've all gone.
So I remember you saying in my training just 2 years ago, that it can take 17 years to see change.
Oh yeah, from evidence into practice.
Yeah.
So that was specifically in the health system.
Yes.
Yeah, that it takes an average. So not it just can take. That's as long as it might take. That's kind of the average. It takes for something to come out in the evidence, and then work through all of the processes.
That's such a worry.
By the time our children
Do it for them.
do it for our kids.
And we just got legislation passed for pay equity. Things are moving incrementally, but
But again, that's just legislation. How can we have pay equity if most employers won't allow you to speak about your salary with your coworkers?
Yeah, that has to change too.
I personally have experience being in an identical role with a man. We started on the same day, we did the same training together, had the same experience, and he was paid more than me. And I found that out only because we happened to be friends, made friends through work, and I found out that way, but he was getting paid more than me.
Did you do something? Like, did you speak up about it?
No, I was 21, 22, so.
And you valued your job, probably.
Yeah.
No, but that's what I often mean. I think, men are probably not so. They don't care. They just and we as women, we think about the others, and it's so probably
relational.
And then
it lets us down because of how our societies are set up.